What's up, guys? Welcome back to Newswave. So as a reminder, later on today, we will have that PlayStation 5 event. I expect to see some big games revealed, release date, pricing, all of that. I will be streaming it here, so if you have notifications on, you're subscribed, you should get alerted. Come on by, and we'll hopefully see some really fun stuff from Sony later on today. However, we do have to go through a few things this morning, which does include the Mario 3D All-Stars collection, as it did leak online. Data miners started going through it and made some discoveries that kind of kicked the whole controversy around this game into overdrive. We also get to take a look at Sony because it seems that they are now refuting what Bloomberg said yesterday about how they were slashing production on the PlayStation 5, but they did leave out one piece of information that Bloomberg seemed to be reporting around the yields for the chips in the PlayStation 5. As always, guys, if you enjoy these videos, make sure you hit that like button, helps out a ton, and if brand new here, hit that red subscribe button down below, and we're going to start today with some trademarks from Nintendo. And I know you're thinking, okay, trademarks, and yeah, I don't always talk about trademarks that come out because so many do, and a lot of times they don't really mean much, but there are 2 trademarks that popped up in a total of 8 trademarks overall that seem to catch some attention, and we'll quickly look at them and you might see why. Let's go over here to My Nintendo News, who lays them out pretty well, and right away, Pokemon Entei, Game & Watch, Donkey Kong Country, Bowser's Fury, Mario Kart Live, Home Circuit, and Home Circuit, and then the other 2 are translations of previous trademarks that we just went over. The big 2 here, obviously, Pokemon Entei, and then Donkey Kong Country. Now, a new Donkey Kong game wouldn't be too surprising. I guess maybe Retro could have worked on it before, or maybe Nintendo decided to move Donkey Kong Country over to another internal studio. But Tropical Freeze was a great game, so why not continue on with kind of more 2D platforming Donkey Kong Country style gameplay? I'd like to see that. And then the other one, Pokemon Entei, that could be pointing, you think, to like Gold and Silver for Let's Go as the next entry? That would make a lot of sense. It's speculation around both of those right now, but we've heard rumors about another Donkey Kong Country game, and we've heard the idea of them going towards Pokemon Let's Go for Gold and Silver. So 2 trademarks kind of mixed in with a bunch of trademarks that we already know are happening. They're ideas and games that have been presented to us, so something to keep an eye on there. Also, we had heard previously that Rocket League was going to be going free to play this fall, and now we seem to have a release date for it. You can see Nintendo's tweet here that says, get ready to take your shot when Rocket League goes free to play on Nintendo Switch on September 23rd. It'll be free to play everywhere else as well. Microsoft is the strange one because you still have to pay for the Xbox Live Gold membership to play free-to-play games, whether it's like Fortnite, for example. It's really annoying, and I hope they get rid of that weird requirement to have to pay $60 to play free-to-play games that are probably using like Epic servers as an example with Fortnite. But Rocket League going free to play is a good idea because I think a lot of people who are going to buy Rocket League have probably already purchased it. And if you go free to play, you of course open up just the overall player base to new players. And that means, of course, that they can potentially sell more microtransactions to new players and all this. You won't need an online subscription, whether it's with Nintendo or Sony, to play this free to play, which is good news. So hey, look out. If you haven't tried Rocket League yet, for whatever reason, I feel like most people have probably already bought it. It will be free to play in just over a week. Oh, and we did get some more information on the Xbox Series S and the Xbox Series X, and a lot of it came down to dimensions, what comes in the box, but the one that seemed to get a lot of traction and people were talking about a lot was the weight of both systems. They're drastically different, but one is quite heavy, like to the point where it's heavier than pretty much any system you've seen so far. Let's go over here to GameSpot because they had a nice comparison of previous systems' weights as well. And you can see at the top, Series S is 4.25 pounds, which is actually really good. That's very impressive. That's lighter by a good bit than even the Xbox One S. But then look at the Series X. It is 9.8 pounds. That is 1.5 pounds or so heavier than the Xbox One X, which is the next heaviest system. It is quite a bit heavier than like the PlayStation 4 Pro. Yeah, it's going to be a big system, we'll say. Heavy, dense system. Now, we don't really know how much the PlayStation 5 is going to weigh, but I think there is a very good possibility, as estimates are even pointing to, of it being even heavier than the Series X, but this shouldn't surprise anyone just with how they look. I mean, the PlayStation 5 is like this massive thing. They're going to like get a tow truck to get it out of the store. But the Series X, I looked at it. It looks like a PC tower. It's like, yeah, it's probably going to be heavy. It's just crazy now. We're getting to the point where we have 10-pound systems. And guys, with some of the quick news out of the way, let's get into the bigger stuff. We're going to start right away with the Super Mario 3D All-Stars Collection that's out in 2 days now. I am looking forward to it. Like I said, I want to play back through Galaxy. I've played Sunshine fairly recently on the GameCube, so Galaxy is the one that I haven't played in a little while now. So I'm looking forward to going back through that. But there's a lot of things hitting the internet over the last 24 hours for this game because it did leak out online. When we started seeing it show up in stores, generally the next step is that it leaks online because it breaks street dates somewhere, and then that person just dumps it onto the internet, people download it, and then they start sifting through the code, and a lot of things were found. And unfortunately, there are people who are thinking this might have been at least 3 different ports to the Switch and not emulation, but that doesn't appear to be the case. Let's go over to Oatmeal Dome here, who pointed all this out and went through several tweets kind of addressing different things. It appears all the games are emulated. Galaxy and Sunshine run under a Wii and GameCube emulator named, I'm gonna go with Haji, possibly made by Nerd, that's Nintendo of Europe division. Mario 64 is running under an N64 emulator. Galaxy in particular is really interesting. It appears they recompiled the original code to run natively on the Switch CPU, but everything else, GPU and audio, is running in the emulator. Now they go on to talk a bit about the Mario 64 version that'll be there, as they say Shindo Pack ROM is used. Texture code and text translation patches are applied on the fly. And interestingly, first-person camera has inverted controls versus the original. Oddly, also uses Vulkan API. Now, I will say MVG did mention that maybe the developers at Nintendo were a bit more comfortable with Vulkan to use that, as that is something that's been used on the Switch since it's come out. So that makes sense. MVG did a whole video going over some of the more technical aspects to the code and the programming and all of that. And I encourage you to go check that out after this video to get a bit more insight as to what's going on here with these different games running through emulation. The thing here is we have a GameCube emulator running Sunshine. We have a Nintendo 64 emulator that, by the way, seems to be coming from the Wii U, as there were even some remnants and leftover code that were pointing to things like the Perfect Dark render, Kirby 64, and people were wondering, does that mean that maybe Nintendo is planning to bring those to a Nintendo 64, Nintendo Switch Online release? I mean, it's possible, but people are saying, oh, this probably points to just leftover code from that Wii U emulator. I heard that the Wii U emulator had a fair amount of input lag and latency, and we'll see if that also carries over. However, it seems that they had to change up quite a bit to move it over to the Switch. But we have a GameCube emulator, we have a Nintendo 64 emulator, but then we have the Wii emulator, but Mario Galaxy seems to have its game code altered to run natively on the Switch CPU, and just the graphic and audio side is being emulated. So yeah, again, this isn't going to sit too well with a lot of people because it doesn't sound like they said, oh, let's just port all 3 of these over to the Switch. We'll do all this cool stuff to it, make it look real pretty. It's Mario's 35th anniversary. Guys, they couldn't even put a slipcover over the box. Like that's a lot right now. They didn't even put a manual in the thing, right? Like in terms of like, oh, we'll celebrate it. We'll do all this cool stuff with the physical copy that is limited, by the way. They didn't do all that. When we were leading up to this, I figured, okay, if they do throw these 3 games into a collection, they'll probably do like bare minimum on this, because to Nintendo, they're looking at this and saying, well, it has 3 good 3D Mario games in there, and I'm including Sunshine in that, yes. They have 3 good Mario games in there that are 3D. That to them is enough to do that, even if that means they're just emulating some of these and bring it over. There's also talk about it being a 6-month development window. Yeah, they figured, oh, we'll get this emulated, we'll bring it over. They've already probably made the emulators. The GameCube emulator was rumored forever ago because we thought there'd be GameCube Virtual Console on the Switch, and we're still waiting for that. Now, my take on this is I am disappointed that it turns out Nintendo didn't spend as much time and investment in this collection of what should be a massive celebration for Mario. Like I said, these are good games. I would have loved to have seen them, instead of like run emulators and like do some cleanup work on the textures and some of the UI, to really move all 3 over and spend time enhancing them and doing all this. But at that point, Nintendo would probably want to sell each one separately for more, right? Like if you think about it, these are $20 games basically when you buy them as a bundle. Nintendo might have separated them and made them like $40 each or something, or like $30 each. that would have been worth their time. And if it would have gone that route, yeah, I would have rather done that than just get games running on emulators. But of course, the portability factor is there with the Switch, and realistically, the whole emulator thing is only going to affect a small amount of people compared to the massive amount of people who are going to buy this game. We're going to hear like 15 million units, and like 1% of the people who bought it will probably be thinking about the whole emulator thing. And that's kind of Nintendo's viewpoint on this is, we'll emulate them, we'll sell a ton of them, and then we'll discontinue at the end of March. Now, the part I'm interested in is, well, this is the first time I guess we're gonna see an emulator on the Switch that will be running a GameCube game. So I'm curious about performance on that, and does this mean that we could get to a point where Nintendo really does more with the GameCube library by bringing them up and putting them through this emulator? And does that mean that we could have a virtual console for Nintendo Switch Online for Nintendo 64 games, right? Where they drop that in, since we have this Nintendo 64 emulator seemingly ready to go. I'm thinking more about the future now than what this 6-month release is going to be. I'm hopeful that next year Nintendo 64 games come over, and I mean, if this emulator shows that it can work really well on the Switch, I say why not? And then here's hoping that there is a future where GameCube games do come over someday. That might be a next-gen Switch feature, though, at this point. Let's be real. I will say, out of the three, I probably am most interested to see how this Mario Galaxy is going to run, since they seem to have had to do some changes than just run it straight through an emulator. So maybe that was just something they felt the need to do to make it run better. That'll be something I'll be curious about with like Digital Foundry going over it. But yeah, it looks like, for the most part, all three of these games are just being emulated, and you're buying 3 games from Nintendo that you probably have already been emulating and getting similar results out of on like your PC, for example. But I am curious how many people out there right now watching this are like, oh, it's emulated, I'm not gonna get it. Or are you still like, well, I mean, it's a 6-month limited release, I still kind of want to play like Sunshine or Galaxy on the go. We'll see how it turns out. Let me know where you are on this, if this absolutely just like killed your decision to buy this game. Next up, let's talk about Sony refuting that Bloomberg report that we had talked about yesterday that made the rounds online about them slashing PlayStation 5 production numbers from 15 million down to 11 million, where they had originally started before attempting to up those numbers. And something I noticed, and a lot of people noticed, is that Sony's stock really started to tumble after this report came out. And if you get a big publication like a Bloomberg or New York Times or any of those that post something like this that show you kind of slipping up, going up to a big console launch or a big piece of technology launching, yeah, that can have an impact on your stock. So it makes sense why Sony would actually respond to this, because most of the time companies will say no comment. Sony felt the need to comment on this one. So let's go over here. GamesIndustry.biz did have the response. Sony responded to them about this. While we do not release details related to manufacturing, the information provided by Bloomberg is false. We have not changed the production number for PlayStation 5 since the start of mass production. Now, originally I said Bloomberg started and said 11 million units. And then they moved it up to 15. Then they moved back to 11. So that was one thing I mentioned, okay, with Machizuki reporting this, is that the original 11 million could have been something that's been locked in, and they played around with the idea of moving it up, and then you have this game of telephone, and eventually it gets to Machizuki that they had to scale it back down, and it goes from this whole, went from 11 to 15 back to 11, so really nothing happened. But one other piece of information in there was that they were having a hard time with the yield for that PlayStation 5 chip. People were talking about it being 50%, which is not great, 1 out of every 2. That's not good. Now, AMD seems to say that it is within reason and it's getting better, getting to where they expected it to be, but that could cause concern for the first year or two when it comes to stock numbers if they are really struggling with the yield for the chip inside of the PlayStation 5. However, right now, Sony is mostly concerned about getting these things on store shelves, of course. That's why they are flying them out and all over the place. And then, of course, building up hype with the event later on today. So while this still seems kind of confusing and all over the place, 11 million units through March, I'm going to stick with that right now. That's where we seem to be. We'll see what happens. I'm hoping for a big show later on today. They'll get that hype train going, of course. And here's hoping we can pre-order it soon, because I do think it's going to be very tough to get one of these. And in our last bit of news, let's talk about GameStop very quickly. Not that they're closing a bunch more stores. That just seems like normal at this point, right, with GameStop. But I had people asking quite a bit about trade-ins for their current systems going up to next gen. That's something a lot of people like to do. If they have like an Xbox One X or an Xbox One and they want to get the Series X or the Series S, they may want to see if they can find some promotions, and it looks like people are starting to spot some that GameStop will be running. You can see this here, for example. It says get up to $200 when you trade select consoles toward the pre-order of Xbox Series X and S. You see $200 for a One X or a PS4 Pro. The one that caught my eye, though, is that you can get $100 for one of those Xbox One VCR systems. And if you think about that, you can go from the Xbox One VCR to the Series S for $200. That's pretty good. I would take advantage of GameStop now while you can, because they might only have a couple more years left in them, so might as well get a pretty good deal from them that way. But, I mean, you can also just hold on to your system as well. But this tends to be something that happens with GameStop, where they will give more than they should for a system when a brand new system launches, just because they want to get that new stock of used consoles they can try to resell at holiday time. Specifically this holiday, they'll try to flip all of those very, very quickly. So if you're already thinking about upgrading, I mean, the Series X is going to be a drop-in replacement for your One X. The Series S will be a drop-in replacement for your One S or your old VCR. Might be worth taking advantage of that. And we'll finish up with the comment of the day, as you're seeing here. This is from Sapu saying, do you think they haven't said a peep about Doom Eternal on Switch because now they are trying to get it 4K ready for an upgraded Switch? I think the reason they haven't said much about Doom Eternal on the Switch is because COVID hit and it disrupted development cycles, which would be even harder for Panic Button because they are going back and forth with Bethesda and id, and they're working between all that, and it probably messed them up a bit with remote work happening and development cycles getting thrown into flux all over the place. That's, I think, why Doom Eternal hasn't been talked about much for the Switch, but I do think it's still coming out this year, believe it or not. I could see like Halloween. That would make a lot of sense for Doom Eternal to come out on the Switch. It's already out on other platforms, so it's not like a brand new like release reveal thing, or like, oh, Doom Eternal is a thing and it's coming out. It's like, yeah, we've been playing that all year. I think it'd be fine if it only had like an announcement and like a 2 or 3 week like wait for it to drop, right? That'd be perfectly fine. That is a game though, if we do get a 4K mid-gen refresh, AI upscaling Switch next year, that and then Doom 2016 are 2 games that I would love to see on it, just see how it looks, because that can drop in resolution, get kind of blurry at times, so let's put that AI upscaling to a test if they actually do it next year. And ladies and gentlemen, that's gonna do it here for Newswave. If you enjoyed this video, guys, hit the like button, really helps out. If not, hit the dislike, leave comments down below about everything we talked about here today, whether it's the Super Mario 3D All-Stars Collection, where we now know that all 3 games are being emulated. Galaxy's a bit of a mixed bag there, with part of it being ported over to run natively on the Switch CPU, but does the idea of these games being emulated change your opinion about it? And are you thinking about holding off now? Or are you just saying, you know, it's a limited release, I gotta grab it? Also, what do you think about Sony refuting the Bloomberg report about them slashing PlayStation 5 production? Do you think they're just saying that to save face with investors and make sure there's no hiccups with this launch? Let me know about that, guys, down below. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.